Hi, I'm Jonathan Grieser, and this is the third in a series of videos on the Eucharist, past and present. If you've watched the first two, I hope you have figured out that I'm treating the topic and Christian history with very broad brushstrokes. But I also hope that many of you are learning something about our worship and our faith. In this third installment, I want to highlight the transformation in Eucharistic theology and practice that took place during the Middle Ages. We're talking about around 1,000 years, and I can't hope to be at all comprehensive. So I'm going to address just several things that were enormously important for that period and for later Christianity, especially in the West. The first is the debate and theological development as Christians sought to understand the meaning of the bread and wine. As I pointed out in the first video, John 6 provides language that connects Christ's flesh to the bread and to salvation or eternal life. Jesus said, "I am the living bread that came down from heaven, and those who eat my flesh and drink my blood have eternal life." That's not to say there isn't similar language in the Synoptic Gospels and in Paul's account. Jesus says, "This is my body, this is my blood," when he gives the bread and wine to his disciples. Now, there was considerable debate on what that transformation was, how it happened, and perhaps most importantly, how to explain it theologically. Eventually, the church would define the doctrine of transubstantiation using categories borrowed from the Greek philosopher Aristotle, who distinguished between the substance of a thing and its accidents, or to use language that might make more sense in our contemporary context, between a thing's essence or nature and its appearance. Accordingly, when the bread and wine were consecrated and became Christ's body and blood, their essence or nature changed, but their appearance didn't. The second important development was the increasing focus on the moment of consecration. Because this was when the bread and wine became the body and blood of Christ, piety and practice came to focus on that moment, with an insistence that the priest elevate the elements, the bread and wine, so that laity could better see them. That's why the bells were added to the service, so that they could draw the attention of people to what was taking place on the altar. Seeing this moment of transformation, or indeed seeing the consecrated host, became a means of receiving the grace of the sacrament, and devotional practices around the reserved sacrament, processions, for example, featuring consecrated hosts and the like, became very common and remain so in the Catholic Church to this day. At the same time, regular reception of the sacrament by lay people became increasingly uncommon. Indeed, the Fourth Lateran Council in 1215 required as a minimum that lay people receive communion once a year. That was normally at Easter. Now, there were a number of reasons for this. Among them, the logistics of distributing communion, the theological necessity that people be in a state of grace in order to receive worthily, which required, in advance of reception, the sacrament of confession and absolution. And in addition to these changes, one other significant development was that the cup, the wine, was restricted from the laity. One other issue that had already arisen in the early church but became more prominent in the Middle Ages was the question whether the sacrament's power or efficacy was dependent on the priest's spiritual state. If a priest was in a state of mortal sin, would the sacraments he performed transmit grace? The church in the Middle Ages answered that question in the affirmative, that it didn't matter, but it is a question that remains alive in contemporary Christianity.